Wesley Vissers fez declarações polêmicas sobre o Ramon e a disputa pelo Olímpia, que tem causado uma polêmica gigante no cenário do fisiculturismo mundial e dividido opiniões, principalmente em um ponto específico que o Vissers abordou e tem dado o que falar. Nem sempre é fácil se manter na dieta. Quem nunca acabou comendo um doce e bateu aquele arrependimento. Mas a Ganexa chegou para mudar tudo. As pastas de amendoim e alfajores da Ganexa acompanham whey protein na composição e contém zero adição de açúcar. Dessa forma, você pode incluir algo realmente gostoso na sua dieta, sem ter aquele arrependimento, mas sempre lembrando de respeitar os macros. O melhor também é o custo-benefício que a empresa oferece, onde inclusive você pode adquirir combos e pastas de amendoim de 1 kg por um preço muito acessível, sem contar a diversidade de sabores que você encontra no site. Atletas como a Miss Olímpia Franciele Matos e o Felipe Franco utilizam as pastas de amendoim da Ganexa e aprovam a qualidade e, claro, o sabor dos produtos. Utilizando o cupom NOTICIASMAROMBA, você ainda garante um bom desconto na hora da sua compra. O link para o site vai estar aqui na descrição. Wesley Vissers participou de uma live recentemente no canal Muscle & Fitness, com o Chris Cormier, o Dennis James e o Milo Sasser. Lá o Vissers deu algumas declarações bem polêmicas sobre o Ramon e o Sebum, e está parecendo extremamente confiante de que não o Ramon, mas ele sim é o único oponente à altura do Sebum. Nós legendamos esses momentos aqui pra vocês, então sem mais enrolações, bora conferir o que foi dito pelo Wesley.
How do you think that happened? How do you think that happened for you, like so quickly? You went from being a middle of the pack guy, 8th place, 7th place area, and then jumped over people who's won many championships.
And is second and third at the Olympia.
Yeah.
And fourth.
Yeah. Yeah, fourth. I beat everybody there except Chris. That's what happened. So there's two things that really happened for me. So number one, which is I think even the most important thing, is at competitions, you get the first call out, which is random. Sometimes it's in alphabetical order, but this time it was like more random. So I was, I think, number 3, Ramon, I think, number 4, and Urs number 1. So that meant like they did not even have the opportunity or the chance not to compare me. I was compared right from the get-go at the first time we got on stage at all.
In the groups,
Yeah, and I because of my numbering, I was also in the middle in that call out. So it just happened to be right next to Ramon and with Urs in the same call out. And then the judges and I myself, when I watched the live stream later, could see the impact that standing next to those guys actually had. They could see the size difference that was there. My conditioning then was also top notch at that show. So when I stood there in the front relaxed, you could see the definition in the legs, and all of a sudden they were like, oh, wait a second, the legs aren't a weak point anymore when standing next to Ramon. I mean, they take up the same amount of space on stage, which is what Tyler Mannion himself literally said after the show. So I think the first impression was so good in combination with the second thing, the peak was also perfect, that it was difficult to ignore. Mm-hmm. And then when they kept comparing us, they were like, at least that's what I think, they were like, okay, we just see that Wesley is, edging Ramon out in certain poses, and Ramon may be better here and there, but Wesley is overall just a bigger guy who is peaked better, a bit more conditioned, so better presentation. So overall, he just deserved to win that show because on that day, Wesley was the best. But then even so, it was unexpected for me to beat all of those guys like in one show compared to the Olympia, of course. So that it's still super special for me when I think back about it. So the goal is to give Chris Bumstead the toughest battle he has yet so far. He's had so far. So every time now, we all know at the Olympia when Chris, is in shape, he's going to win. It's like, they can do a two-man call-out with Ramon, but we all know pretty much immediately Chris is going to win. I mean, at least that's how I viewed it. They try to make it exciting with Ramon, but there's still too much of a difference between him and Chris.
Então o Vissers acaba afirmando que em todos os confrontos entre o Sebum e o Ramon, todos eles já sabiam que o Sebum venceria, e que até era tentado criar esse embate dos dois para deixar as coisas mais emocionantes, mas que na opinião dele o Sebum nunca foi ameaçado, dessa forma diminuindo os feitos do Ramon frente ao Sebum, deixando claro que segundo ele o Ramon nunca foi um candidato à altura do Chris Bumstead. Porém isso vai na contramão do que foi visto no último Olímpia. Se ele afirmasse que em todos os outros Olímpias, exceto o último, o Chris estava realmente superior aos demais, seria até mais compreensível, já que no último Olímpia o resultado foi questionado por muitas pessoas, e até mesmo o Sebum deixou escapar no momento da premiação que não tinha essa certeza da sua vitória. Mas essa parece ser a opinião do Wesley, que em nenhum momento o Ramon ameaçou a coroa do Sebum, e em seguida afirma que ele sim fará isso.
So I want, just like what I said before the Arnold, like everybody pretty much thought Ramon was going to take it, right? I mean, you think, okay, Ramon is going to do it. Usually it's a battle between Ramon and Urs. And now Brian actually got into the mix as well, very well, in a good way. But we all thought, if we're honest, okay, Ramon is just going to win the Arnold Classic. But I said beforehand, it's not just going to be Ramon and who's going to be second. It's going to be a battle between me and Ramon. At least I want to battle him. When I'm standing next to him, then you will see the truth. And the same thing will happen with Chris Bumstead. Like the exact same things I said about Ramon, the tiny waist, the supposedly bigger legs. All of that disappears the moment that I actually stand next to the guys. And that's what I want to happen at this Olympia. And also, I am a better bodybuilder now than the Arnold Classic. I can confidently say that. I worked on the weaker areas, or the areas to fill in more, to be more proportionate, because that is one of Chris's strengths, of course. Every pose has very good proportions. His silhouette is very nice, which is why he's the champion for 5 times now. But he isn't perfect. No one is perfect. So once I stand next to him, I just want to overpower his weaknesses, and that my weaknesses won't be so easily overpowered by his strengths.
What do you consider Chris's weakness?
So he can get very conditioned, but like Milos said before, that there's nobody who has the amount of deep cuts and striations that I have, for example, in the legs, which will be exposed when you stand next to Chris, who has injured muscles, like in the hamstring, the quads, the shoulder biceps. All of that I do have. So I have all the clean muscles, the clean lines, every single detail. In the back double bicep, you can see no blurring of the shoulders. Like all of these things, the moment that they see that in a bodybuilder, the judges say, wait a second, so it is possible to have those details there. Even though almost no bodybuilder has it, it is possible because, someone is showing it. And then when you stand next to Chris and actually be taller, be heavier, it's going to be a tough battle. And that is my true goal with Chris, that it's not just going to be, oh yeah, Chris is going to be in that pose easily. No, it's actually going to be a challenge. And my big benefit here is that the first pose, the mandatory pose, is the front double bicep, which, to be honest, I'm very confident I can win that pose. So I can win the first pose already. And then you move to the side chest, which for him is a strength, usually a strength over everybody. But I think when I stand next to him, it's also not going to be such a super dominant pose anymore. So, right at the beginning of the comparisons, I will be taken seriously right away against Chris. So that's what I have in mind that my goal is. And
that's good. I love it.
What's going to happen?
I can't even argue with what he just said. I can't argue with anything.
It's very good. I like his analysis. So what happens when you turn to the back double biceps?
So when I turn to the back double biceps, what people think right now is that my lower body is going to be exposed next to his lower body. But as always, presentation, as you know, Milos, can be drastically changed the way you showcase yourself on stage. So for me, we have tweaked the back double bicep because the way I positioned my legs, it wasn't really that pleasing. So I made it more pleasing and more proportionate with the upper body. And you will see an even more conditioned side of me compared to the Arnold next to Chris. So I want to expose him in that area where his hamstrings may be conditioned but not clean, because of the injury. When I stand next to him, you will see that all those clean lines there. The portion of the lower to upper body is better now because it's simply more muscle mass. And yeah, I mean, when I stand in a back double bicep against him, one thing that I remembered very clearly is that Ramon beat Chris Bumstead, according to Tyler Mannion, in the back double biceps last year. So, you know, I beat Ramon at the Arnold in the back double biceps, according to Tyler. So that's also weighing in my mind a little bit that, yeah, I mean, okay,
turning into the abs and thighs. How do you see that?
Abs and thighs is going to be the most difficult pose to defeat Chris in. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I'm going to try to beat him in that pose. I know that's going to be very difficult for me to beat him in that pose. If I would have to pick any pose that he's going to beat me in, that would be it. But then again, there are, as Tyler also explained in one of his videos, which poses are allowed during the abs and thighs. One of them is, of course, the regular vacuum pose. When I do the vacuum next to Chris, you know, his waist may be smaller, but my clavicle width and on top is wider and the lats as well. With the legs from the front to quads also not being weak, I can stand in such a way that in that particular pose, I'll be super competitive with him. And also I'm just a taller, slightly bigger guy also, which will help because when he stands next to Ramon, he's going to be the bigger guy and also with a great V taper. So he automatically basically wins. But with me, it's going to be a different story. And then the regular crunch down abs and thighs, I've also worked on that to, like you also say, first suck in the obliques and then hit the abs and thighs. So that's what I've been working on as well. So I'm just going to make my waist appear as small as possible, the legs appear as big as possible, the back as wide as possible, and that's all I can do to maximize my pose in the abs and thighs. So yeah, I think that's going to be his strongest pose over me.
Now, as you sit there, Wesley, can you sit there and say, I can beat Chris Bumstead this year?
Yes.
Is this coming out of you?
I really honestly think it's possible. I really do think so. In my
you have to believe it.
Yeah, but it's not even that. It's like everybody always says you gotta go to a show and always think you can win.
No.
But this time, I honestly think I can win. Yeah. I can win. It really is possible. If I peak perfectly, if I'm better than the Arnold, better proportions, if my presentation is top notch, if I just never slip up on stage, which at the Arnold I didn't either, but you know, this time I'll be even better with each individual pose. So hold the pose, you know, just don't show any weakness at all. Next to Chris, it's gonna be possible.
Pois é, galera, então o Wesley tá se mostrando bem confiante de que ele sim é o cara certo para fazer o que, segundo ele, o Ramon não fez, que é ameaçar o trono do Sebum e até vencê-lo. Na live ele ainda faz o seu top 5 para esse ano, se colocando em primeiro, o Sebum em segundo e o Ramon em terceiro. Um dos pontos mais apontados pelo Wesley é de que a diferença entre o Ramon e o Sebum ainda é muito grande, e que entre ele e o Sebum não seria tão grande, já que ele afirma trazer pontos fortes que o Sebum não tem, como um condicionamento a mais e músculos limpos, sem lesões, como o Sebum tem nas pernas, por exemplo. Além disso, considera o fato dele ser bem alto como um ponto forte a mais contra o Sebum, que os outros atletas não têm. Ele chega a afirmar que dá pra vencer o Sebum no duplo bíceps de costas, pois venceu o Ramon nessa pose no Arnold, e ele lembra que o Tyler afirmou que o Ramon venceu o Sebum nessa pose no Olímpia. Sendo assim, se ele venceu o Ramon, também venceria o Sebum que perdeu para o Ramon nessa pose. Seria um raciocínio lógico se o duplo bíceps de costas do Ramon no Arnold não tivesse sido bem inferior ao que ele apresentou no Olímpia. Por isso, não é bem assim que as coisas funcionam. Mas a verdade é que o Wesley está fazendo tudo corretamente com relação ao marketing dele para o Olímpia. Nessa live com grandes personalidades do esporte, falando dessa forma, ele espera convencer o público e até mesmo trazer os olhares dos árbitros para esses pontos levantados por ele. E para isso ele realmente precisa demonstrar essa confiança que a gente viu que ele tem. Também sabemos que o público gringo curte esse perfil de atleta, confiante e que se sente campeão antes mesmo de subir nos palcos. E o Wesley está entregando isso propositalmente. E para isso ele precisa convencer que o Ramon já não é mais um problema para ele, e que ele sim é um problema para o Sebum. Mas nós queremos saber a sua opinião. Acredita que faz sentido o que foi falado pelo Vissers, ou ele está sendo pretensioso demais em suas declarações? Deixa o seu comentário aqui embaixo, o vídeo vai ficando por aqui, um abraço a todos e até a próxima.